Okay, there are so many ways to do fire. There's volume simulation, which is usually, I think, what Manta Pro attempts to do. There's particle simulation, which you can have Manta Pro do, but also Blender just does it natively. You can do it through animation of like what's called a card. I think that's what they're called. So like people do that mostly with like hair, for example. So instead of actually doing a physical strand of hair or, doing the complicated dense data of a particle system to create hair, what you could do instead is create like a strand of 13 hairs and put it on a single plane and then just line a lot of those up and you have an entire head of hair. Very common in game development. And then there's just creating a mesh and just hoping that it looks like hair. um, you'll see that a lot in like VR chat avatars, for example. They'll have like an aloe leaf looking thing, and that's just one single mesh, but that's like a strand of hair type of situation. So I went down the rabbit hole today. And I went through everything from cards to meshes. I tried to avoid simulations just because I want to see if I can do something in Blender and also kind of bring that into Unity at a later time. And also, I don't want to sit here for like 30 minutes to like 2 hours, just to bake out a simulation for like a single photo that I want to post on social media and stuff like that. So the way that I would normally achieve that is by doing a mesh or something and then just appending that into every new scene and then just slapping it onto the head or the clavicle or wherever I want the fire to be. So let's go from simple to relatively complex. Through this rabbit hole in particular. So we start with my first sort of, actually I don't know if this was the first, but this is sort of the beginning of my research into the cards sort of thing. So the idea is that you have it's a single plane, right? But then once you've applied your textures and or how you want the texture to be, your shader really, what it should supposed to look like is this darker scenario is supposed to be absolutely transparent, but Blender 4.1 kind of changed the way that the backface culling occurs in the alpha settings. So that's fun. But I don't think I'm too far off here, and I really like the way that this fire works. But this is what I mean by it being relatively simple in flow. So after following one tutorial, it was just sort of a single path of stuff. There's a little branch here, but that's not too bad. Not like what we're going to see. And all I need to do is figure out what's the deal with my transparency sort of situation, fine tune that, and then I just have to animate one of these guys. And it's an okay flame. I could work with that. I could live with that and be happy, but this has to be transparent. So let's move on to our second one, which is a little more complicated and as a result has a little more complicated errors that go along with it. The biggest one being the idiot sitting on this side of the keyboard. So again, as you can kind of see that this is a little more complicated. We now have two paths that converge into one. And then we have a sort of similar setup to the last thing. And so this is what I get, right? And I'm in material mode or viewport shading. This is what it looks like in the rendered view. It looks a little better than what it does here, but it doesn't look like what I was following along to, which is this. So I don't know whether or not to be concerned or if I should be here, just so you know whom I'm following along to. So that's their result, and then this is mine. So I'm obviously doing something wrong here, but I can't identify what that thing is yet. And when I do, this one's probably more attractive to me than the last one. But let's get into the more 3D thing. So this is where I started to move away from the card system, and I wanted to do some meshes, right? So this one is my first sort of attempt at this scenario. Shader editor. And it's pretty complicated. 2 pathways, which one kind of shares both of. Did I? I did. Which, and so this is what this one looks like. And so I don't know. I don't think I'm that far off on. Oops, not that one. I don't think I'm that far off on this one. Though they get a lot more. This creator gets a lot more visibility out of their flames than I do. And I don't know. I don't really. It's another one where I'm just trying to figure out what sort of thing I'm doing wrong. The other thing that's probably a commonality is the fact that I'm working off of Blender 4.2, and a lot of these creators are videos that are working off of Blender. This one in particular is 3.4. So I don't know. That might be a problem. But is it going to be a problem? Is going to stop me from figuring it out? Maybe. All right. And so then the last sort of experiment that I went through is this one. And this one, again, it's not bad for a mesh. And if I want to do the mesh route, I think I might do this one. But it is a lot more complicated in its shader setup. The other thing too is about the meshes is that they might look really good in Blender, but when it comes to the future, the far future, where I want to start to maybe bring some of these elements into Unity or even Unreal Engine, the way that this animates is through an empty that basically moves up or down, or in one scenario that I had before, it rotates, right? And there's no real correlation or relation between the mesh data and the animation that this guy goes through. So I can't really make it into a shape key, despite what this thing thinks it says. Like if I save this as shape key, it does the basic displace. It doesn't do what the empty asks the displacement to do. I hope that made sense. So the empty is kind of the thing that's the master animator here, not the displacement modifier, So if I were to try to save this as shape key, instead of getting this cool little thing, it's going to do whatever the displacement does without the empty, which I don't know why. It doesn't make sense to me. So like if I save this as shape key and I do this, it kind of, except it's expanding, it's not undulating. So that's why I don't do that. So anyways, that was that rabbit hole. And it's why I'm super scared of this tackling a project like this, because I know that there's just so many ways to do it, and each way is complicated in their own right. But I think I'm going to pursue the card method a lot heavier than I am going to pursue the mesh method, because I think I can get a lot more in the long run out of the single plane flame cards than I can with a flame mesh. So there you go.